an event that was planned by the School Improvement Coalition, which is a nonpartisan group which is interested in making sure that the schools get fixed. And we asked Gabi if she would come do a little workshop on school finance. I was on the school board for 4 years, and I can tell you that it is the most complicated thing that you will ever try to understand. You get money from all these different people in different ways and at different times, and it's crazy. So, Gabi Juba is a certified fraud examiner, and she has one more test score for the CPA exam, and she'll get the results in 2 weeks. She's currently the Chief Financial Officer of Transylvania County Schools. She was born and raised in New Jersey. Jersey girl. She joined the U.S. Marine Corps right out of high school, served for almost 5 years. She has a bachelor's in accounting, an MBA, and is currently working on her doctorate. She'll be finished next spring. Gabi's worked in public accounting, governmental accounting, and has worked in school district accounting for almost 4 years. She has a passion for teaching, loves public speaking. Gabi and her boxer Harley Quinn are a certified therapy dog team and volunteer in Transylvania County Schools. Welcome, Gabi.
So I threw Harley Quinn in there because you'll see some pictures of her, so you're not like, what is this random dog doing? So I love my dog very much. She's my little baby. So we'll go ahead and get started. So this should take me maybe 45 minutes to an hour. If you have questions, please feel free to stop me, and I will definitely answer any questions that you may have. If you need me to talk a little louder or slower, I can do whatever you need. Just let me know. So we will get, I grabbed the remote for the TV. That's not going to help me switch my slides. So we're going to really hit on funding, and then we'll hit on our account code structure, which is really, really long. And they're actually looking to change that and make it double the length that it is right now. So our funding, we receive funding from the state, federal, and local governments. That's our primary form of funding. But then we also have child nutrition, which is off doing its own thing. We have school funds online, so that's the accounts that our schools have, where they bring in all the money from, whether it's donations or the soccer game, the football game. They have that stashed away somewhere different than where we do at the main district office. I do have a slide about the bond at the end, so we will get there to that. So funding for the state, this is the majority of our funding. So this I put up here is Fund 1 is our state funding. This is mostly based on ADM. So as our ADM declines, which it has been doing historically over the last couple of years, we do lose state funding across the board as we lose children. Last year we got 30 PRCs. So PRCs are program report codes, and I want you to think of those as pots of money, very specific. And I've got a few examples here. So 019, you might hear this one. You will never hear it called 019 except maybe by me. It's the small county money, small school money. That's a PRC for the state. We also have literacy intervention, which is letters training, that's 085. And 001s are classroom teachers, this is one that we have as well. So our state gives us allotments 3 different ways. They give us money in the form of months of employment. So I've got 2 pots of money here, 005 and 013, where the state says you have 200 months. You figure out who to pay what out of there. They don't care if it's a 10-month teacher, an 11th-month teacher, a 12-month teacher. As long as we don't go over the 200 months, we're fine. Then I have pots of money where they give me a number of positions. So I've got 4 pots of money where they say, here's your 147.12, and I'm not joking about the 1, 2 they throw in there sometimes. I don't know how I can have a 12th of a person, but they figured out that I can. So we'll get 147.12 people in 001 specifically. And they don't care how much that person costs. They don't care if it's 10, 11, 12 month, as long as I don't go over 147.12 of a person, it balances out. So that leads us to playing almost a game, but not really a game. So every school district in North Carolina, the goal is to pay for your most expensive teachers. So those teachers that have been here 20 plus years out of state 001, because the state picks up the bill, whether they've been here 30 years or they've been here 1 year. So it's cheaper for us to have the state pick up the bill for someone that's been there 30 years. And if we need to pay for teachers at a local, we pay for that 1 year teacher who right now is at $39,000 a year. Much cheaper than the whole bottom of the pay scale. Then the state also gives us money, the third option is just dollar amount, where they say, hey, here's your $100,000, don't overspend it. And then we have to determine, well, how many people can that $100,000 actually pay for? So that's what we focus on with our 3 different ways they give us funding. So these funds are for 1 year only. Our year runs from July 1 to June 30th. So if we do not have this money spent on June 30th, it's gone. Gets taken back by the state. So we can't overspend, but if we underspend, they take it back. There are very few things that roll over. So one example that rolls over for us, which we're very grateful for, is PRC 131. That's our textbook money. So they do let us keep that. We get a little over $100,000 a year in textbook money, but that rolls over for us every year, so we can build up a little bit of a cushion in case we need to do some big adoption in the future that we know is coming. So the state funding is a majority of our funding. So we've, last year, received about $29 million from the state for our people and various other projects. And that is $29 million out of the $50 million that we have total. So a majority of it does come from the state. So we'll move on to fund, okay, go ahead.
So the funding from the state is basically for people?
Mostly it is for people.
Okay.
There's a small handful of pots of money that are more for supplies. So state 13 is CTE teachers, state 14 is a pot of money for supplies for CTE. So it depends on what we're looking at. Letters, which is 085, pays for training but can pay for supplies. So a majority of it is people though. You got another question? Yeah?
Yeah, if it's money from the state, does it come directly to the schools or does it pass through the commission?
So it comes directly to the schools, and I actually have another slide with how we have to get our money from the state because they make that process interesting too. So Fund 3 is our federal funds. So federal funds, they don't come directly from the federal government. They do actually run through DPI, which is the Department of Instruction for North Carolina. They run through them. Fund 3, these are grants that we need to rewrite every year. So if we miss the deadline to rewrite our federal grants, we don't get a penny. So we have to be very conscious of when those are due, if they require additional documentation, whatever they need, we want to get it to them so we can receive as much federal funding as possible. Our state grants, on the other hand, a majority of them are automatic. So just because we're a school district, we're automatically going to get 001 for those teachers. They're going to automatically give us textbook money. We don't have to write any grant, we don't have to follow any deadlines, they're just going to give us that money. Compared to the federal government, they're not just going to give us money unless we ask for it and can prove that we need it. So we are allowed carryover sometimes with the federal government, where those grants, they run on weird cycles. So we are allowed to, on June 30th, still have some left over, and they'll let us keep it for a little length of time after June 30th. So they don't love when we do that. So when we write the grant, we write it to use the whole pot of money. So that if we don't use the whole pot of money, they start asking questions. Well, why'd you write the grant that way? Why didn't you use all the money? So it is better if we do use all the money that we said we were going to use for exactly what we said we were going to use it for, so we don't get a bunch of questions on the back end. So for federal, last year we received 12 PRCs, which again are those pots of money. Those are standard for us usually. So one example you might hear occasionally is PRC 050, which is Title I. We get Title I every year. That typically helps our elementary schools. And we got at least 25 ESSER PRCs. And I say at least because the ESSER PRCs all were federal, and they all came in at different times, and they all expired at different times. So they didn't all happen in 1 year for me to try to count and say, oh, last year we got this many. Some of them carried over, so we've got only a handful left that will expire this coming September.
People may not know what ESSER is.
Yes, okay, so ESSER, that is the COVID relief funds that we received. So they did give us a lot of money in COVID relief funds. We got in one PRC alone over $7 million of COVID relief funds. They really went all out to try to help us with any way they could to help us help the kids to address learning loss for the most part. Now those 25-ish PRCs for ESSER were not open. We couldn't just spend it on whatever we felt like spending it on, kind of like our state grants. They were specific with you can only use this to contract with school nurses. You can only use this to run this special summer school program. You can only use this to do this with it. So we had to really be careful with what were the stipulations that we can and could not use that money for the ESSER PRCs. So thankfully, the federal government gives us all of our money in dollars. So we just get a dollar amount that we can say, okay, we can go up to that dollar amount and not over. So the federal government has a different fiscal year than the state and that we do and the local government does. So the federal government runs October 1 to September 30th. So what does that mean? That means on July 1, if we don't have any carryover left, which I mentioned before, we don't like to have carryover if we can help it. So if we don't have carryover on July 1, we don't get this funding until October, maybe November, sometimes it's December before I see any of this funding. And even then they give it to us in pieces. So they give us a piece in December and they'll give us the rest in February or March. So it makes budgeting difficult. So this is part of the reason why we need some sort of fund balance, because I pay for about $2 million worth of teachers out of federal. And I can't just tell somebody in August, September, October, if we don't get money till November for those 4 months, hey, I'm sorry, the federal government hasn't given us our money yet, so you just can't have your paycheck. So we have to be able to float that payroll out of local temporarily. And then when we get the federal money, then we move that back into federal where it actually belongs. So that's also not unique to us. Every school district does that too. It's the way we have to play the game with how we receive our funding. So to make things more interesting with the federal and state here, we share one bank account for them, which seems, I know the money does flow through, like federal money flows through the state, so it's all in one bank account, but we need to request our money from DPI. So it's not just sitting in a bank account somewhere for us. So right now what they've done, they've changed the schedule. So on Mondays, I can ask for federal money. On Tuesdays, I can ask for state money. And on Wednesdays, there's a special transfer I can do, and I don't see that money till Friday. So we don't like to have emergencies at the school district if we can help it. Like, we need to think long-term, we need to think ahead of the game, because I can't get the cash if I don't know. Like, if I find out on Tuesday that I needed federal money Monday, it's gotta wait till the next Monday and I won't see it till Friday. So they don't actually give us our money. They make us ask for the money as we're spending it. So completely different, maybe a little backwards. The way I think about that, this way they get to keep all the interest. Honestly, if I was the state, I'd want to keep all the interest too. That's a lot of interest.
What is
DPI?
DPI?
DPI is the Department of Instruction.
Okay.
Yep. So fun thing about this bank account as well, so it is supposed to zero out at the end of every month. So if we ask for too much money, they take it back at the end of every single month and make us re-ask again the beginning of the next month for whatever it is that we need. So now we've got our Fund 2, which is local. So local, we've got a couple different pots of money. So in local, we've got Fund 2, Fund 4, and Fund 8. So Fund 2 here, this is funding from our county commissioners for programs that the state or federal government either doesn't pay for. Got a few examples listed here. So like our ROTC program, that is not state funded, that is not federal funded at the moment. We're working on how we can get it federal funded, so that is paid for locally. We also pay for some teachers that are still working on their license. Sometimes we have teachers from out of state coming here, and so the license doesn't clear through DPI, which is that Department of Instruction. So DPI forces us to pay for them at a local if they don't have a completely clear license. That sometimes happens with our beginning teachers as well. If they're mostly clear, but we're waiting on one little thing for them, DPI will not pick up the bill for them. They make us pay them at a local. Things like band and athletics. So any money that we give to the schools for those programs comes out of local Fund 2 here. So local Fund 2 totals just under $14 million. And the local government, so this is where we get a little interesting, just with the three governments in general. So the state mandates most of our salaries. The state mandates teacher salaries, principal salaries, assistant principal salaries. They give us a salary schedule, we have to follow it. And we actually get audit exceptions and can get in a lot of trouble if we decide to pay a teacher more or less than where they should be on that salary schedule. So we don't have a lot of control over salaries, and the state gets to determine whether or not we get a raise. They determine if we get 2, 3, 4, 5, I don't know if we've ever seen 6 before, but if they want to give us 6, we can have 6. So when they do that though, the federal government doesn't care if the state said have a 6% raise. The federal government's not gonna give us 6% to match that. And the local government, honestly, that's not their problem either, that the state said, here's your 6% raise. I mean, it is a problem, but not a problem if that makes sense. The local government didn't decide we should have a 6% raise, it was the state. So we run into the issue on the local side. This year we're going into, the state right now is mandating a 3% raise. I say right now they're still in short session, so they can change whatever they want to change right now. And I've heard that they have $1 billion surplus in their budget that they're trying to figure out how to spend. And so I've heard rumors that they're going to increase the raise above 3%, but I'm not sure what that's going to look like yet. So for now, we're at 3% for next year. They're also set our retirement rate, and they set our medical rate as well, what the medical benefits will cost us. So trying to convince the other governments that whatever the state mandates, we need that to match is sometimes very challenging. So we receive a piece of our local funding monthly. So what they do is whatever amount they give us every year, they divide it by 12 and give us a piece of that monthly every single month. So this is our pot of money where we also pay charter schools out of. So I'll quickly go into how charter schools are funded. So charter schools can receive state funding. They can also receive federal funding, but they do get a piece of local funding just like we do. But the local funding doesn't come directly from the local government. It funnels through the school districts instead. And that's not just our county, that's the state designed the system that way. Maybe they'll fix it one day, I'm not sure. So what the state has decided, we have to take a total amount of kids. So we take the total amount of our kids, plus every kid living in Transylvania County that's at a charter school. So I have to count them all, so we get one big total, take our 14-ish million, divide it by however many kids that total is, and then pay the charter schools 9 times a year. So the biggest one we wind up paying out is Brevard Academy, because they're here in Brevard. So we pay right now about 10% of our Fund 2 money to charter schools, just right off the top. Gets taken out and sent to charter schools, but that's because that's how many kids we have. When you take the total, we've got about 10% of those kids at charter schools. So I pay right now, I think 7 charter schools, so it's not just Brevard Academy. We've got some kids that attend virtual charter schools or children that are attending schools up in Nashville, so we're all over the place with charter schools. So that comes into a piece of that funding, yes.
And what is that total monthly?
I can pull that for you after if you remind me.
Ballpark.
Ballpark, over $100,000 a year. Not a year, a month, I mean, sorry. Over $100,000 a month, and it totals more than $1 million a year that I pay to charter schools.
Does
Yeah.
Fund 2 also include county employees like nurses and SROs?
Yes. So Fund 2 includes our school nurses. So school nurses are not our employees at the school district. The way they work is they are county employees. And what happens is the county gives us this $14 million and says you do whatever you want with it. And they bill us monthly, like they give us an invoice for the school nurses. So then we pay them back for the school nurses. SROs are the same thing. They bill us monthly for the SROs. So we do get a state grant that pays for the high school SROs, but all the middle school and elementary school SROs run out of our local money as well. So when you start to think about it a little bit, that 10% sort of factors in with the charter schools and gets a little messy. So now we've got another pot of local money, which is Fund 4. So Fund 4 is our capital funds. So actually, I'm getting ahead of myself here. So I'm talking about capital in general on this slide. Fund 4 is the next slide. So on this slide, this is how we can get all of our capital needs met. So we've got Fund 4. We also have lottery funds. So we have a piping project at Pisgah Forest right now going on that is being paid for, a majority of it out of our lottery funds. Lottery funds are run and held by the state, but this is one of those things where we have to, as a Board of Education, decide we're gonna use lottery funds. We fill out an application, it gets signed, then we go and bring it to the county commissioners. They have to approve the use of our lottery funds as well. They sign it, then we send it to DPI, that Department of Instruction. Once DPI approves that we can use lottery funds, they then send the money back to the county. And then the county, either if they're paying the bill, they keep it. If we're paying the bill, they send us the money so we can pay the bills out of lottery funds. So we actually have two different pots of lottery funds. So the first one I was talking about is just our main lottery funds. We've gotten those forever. So whenever you hear someone ask, well, doesn't the schools get a piece of the lottery funding? We definitely do. And the state is actually nice enough, they pay us interest on the lottery funds that they hold for us. So that's a nice change. We also have a new lottery fund that they just created in fiscal year 22, and that is specifically for repairs and renovations. So I also have dollar amounts up here. So our original lottery funds, we get about $250,000 a year. We're grateful to have anything, but it's not the most. We can't redo a whole building with $250,000 a year. Our repair and renovation funds, though, we do get about $500,000. We got that last year. So that's a good amount of money. It's still not quite what we need to make some of the major repairs that we have coming, but it is helpful. So the repair and renovation lottery funds run the same way as the original lottery funds. We have to approve, the county has to approve, DPI has to approve, then the money goes back to the county, and then it might come to us, or they might hold it depending on what we're doing with the project. Yeah, go ahead.
How are those lottery funds allocated based upon, county population, county ADM?
So it's not ADM based. They do have some kind of formula, but I've actually never dug too far into the formula on the state side.
But there's a maximum amount that this county can get?
Yes.
every year. Okay.
Exactly. So that's why we usually get about the same thing every single month. So then we have another option for capital funding. Besides Fund 4, the two pots of lottery funds, we can also get funding through a bond, which we all have kind of been through a little bit here. So I've got that on the last slide. And then there is one other option that we've never gotten before here in Transylvania County, but we're gonna keep trying. It is the Public Schools Needs-Based Grant, and that is run through the state. So I applied for this the first year I got here, and we did not receive funding for this. So they use a tier-based system for how they determine what your needs are. We are, or at the time, we're a Tier 3 school district. So Tier 1 is what they consider the worst needs across the board as far as poverty goes, and they consider us a Tier 3. And that's because we have really high property tax values. That's what determines our tier. And so that has hurt us in the past. I've heard we're now a Tier 2. And so we're gonna see, and we're also hoping if we send a bunch of pictures of some of the needs that we have, that might bump us up as well. So we're doing what we can to try to get that needs-based capital grant from the states. They can give up to $50 million per high school. So we would love to see one of those come through our county. That would be really, really helpful with some of the needs that we have. So I believe this grant opens up in August, and we will be applying again when it opens in August to try for it this year. Yep, go ahead.
When those funds, if they were to come in, do they run through the commissioners or do they go straight to the school system?
I believe it comes right to us, the school district, but I'm not 100% sure.
But then you gotta turn around and request approval to get it back, I suppose.
What was that? Sorry.
You would then have to give it to the commissioners, get their permission to spend it?
So there
Still go through that loop?
is a matching piece on this. So I actually have seen a school district where they got the needs-based grant. I think the state gave them $21 million, and the local government had to put up $1 or $2 million to match, and the local government said, no, we don't want it, send it back. And the school district had to send it back. So there still is a piece to it that the local government has to approve.
But if there was not a local match required, would it follow the same pathway you've described for the other funds, that it has to be submitted to the commission, reviewed, approved, and come back?
I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to look into that, because we've never received it before, so I'm not 100% sure.
We'd love to find out the answer.
Oh, yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
And whatever we can do to support you and get.
Yes, thank you.
Reach out.
It would be awesome if we could get one of those. So now we've got Fund 4 here for local capital. So this is our capital outlay money from the county. This is a little piece of a couple different things. So we have some recurring items that we ask for every year out of this pot of money. Some of those items include furniture and equipment for our schools, so they can buy new desks if they need new desks, if they need a few new bookshelves, whatever it might be. We also have things like laptops. We are a 1-to-1 school district, so that means every child has a laptop. And I don't know about you guys, but especially the little ones, they are hard on those laptops. So we do need to replace them frequently, so we do have a pot of money to go ahead and replace those as needed for those kids. And this pot of money also pays for any other projects we have. So if we've got roof leaks, those are the big ones that we seem to have, at least lately, is roof leaks, HVAC work, boilers, all of that can come out of local Fund 4. But this needs to be specifically approved by the county. So they approve this by project for us. And that does sometimes lead to a little bit of fighting with, well, what do we actually need? Yes, I have had my roof leaks denied, where they've said, no, we're not paying for those. And I've had to go back and fight and say, yes, we need to fix roof leaks. And they've come back and said, okay, we're gonna pay for roof leaks. So sometimes we do get a little bit of that going back and forth. So Fund 4 here, how do we get this money? Where does it come from? So this is sales tax money. It is a portion of Articles 40 and 42, and there's a certain percentage of each that legally has to be given to the school district. So it's not necessarily an arbitrary number that the county just picks every year. It's based on sales tax estimates is what they give us for Fund 4. If they choose to, they could give us additional on top of Articles 40 and 42, but we've never, from me being here, I've never seen that happen. They usually give us Articles 40 and 42, the percentage that they have to, which is great. We still need that money. The bond will fall under this as well, some of the projects and things coming through here. So usually in the last 5 to 7 years, we've seen about $1.5 to $3 million worth of projects get approved out of this pot of money. So we've kind of stayed at about $3 million for the last 3 years. Yes, go ahead.
Do they have to approve by project, or could they could just give you?
They could just give it to us and not approve
and
by
let you-
projects.
And let you guys decide?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm gonna assume this fund has never accrued a significant balance. It's probably money that needs to be used every year as you get it?
We should be using it every year as we get it, yes.
Okay. What's in there right now?
It depends. I don't have a good solid number for you.
Okay.
Guesstimation.
Guesstimation, we've got a couple million sitting in there.
And we're waiting on approval for projects?
Yes.
Okay.
Go
What
ahead.
is the percentage of the Article 40, is it 40% or 30%?
I would have to double check that for you.
Because I know 42 is 60%, right?
Mhm. So then we've got another pot of money here. So this is our Fund 8, which is sort of local, but sort of not local. So Fund 8 is our restricted grants. So restricted grants are things that should be self-funding. I say should, I've got pre-K up here as an example. So pre-K has also been a little bit of a hot topic. Almost all pre-K programs in the state of North Carolina are not self-funding completely, and it's by design for the system. So most of our pre-K kids are NC pre-K, and NC pre-K, what that means is we get a reimbursement from the state. So the state sets that rate. I don't want to misspeak, but it's a little over $500 a month is what we get per kid from the state for NC pre-K, which is not enough to cover the teacher, the TAs, the supplies they need. We also have to get those classrooms up to a certain standard. So what the state reimburses us for is not enough to get that done. So usually other funds have to contribute to try to help keep pre-K operating for all of our kids. Another thing we've got on here, 306 is EC Medicaid billing. So some of our students and some of our teachers can bill Medicaid for some of the services that we provide. So that does help our EC program, especially because that is a continuously growing population that the state does not continuously give us more funding for.
There's a cap.
Yes.
Is what?
EC is exceptional children, so that's our special needs,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
So there are very few local restricted grants. This is our smallest group of funding by far. so we won't spend too much time on them compared to the rest. So then we've got child nutrition, which is Fund 5, so they're kind of off doing their own thing for the most part. So child nutrition is an enterprise fund, so an enterprise fund can run more like a business. So they are supposed to be run for profit. Yet again, sort of like pre-K, most of our child nutrition programs across the state have a really hard time being profitable. And that's by sort of design of the system with the strict dietary restrictions that are set upon child nutrition with what ratio can you put on the plate of what vendors can you use, things like that really make it hard to make a profit in child nutrition. So ours does not operate in the black every year. We do have to use some local funds to help keep them going. We're getting there though, it's getting better every year. We're getting that deficit smaller. So we are also a CEP school system. We were last year, we will be next year. So CEP, I do not know exactly what that stands for, but what that means is all of our kids get to eat for free. And so all of our kids eat for free, and we get to then get reimbursement from the federal government or the state on the back end for those meals. So every child that takes a meal is more money for us for our child nutrition program. So does that mean the kids sometimes take a meal and eat one thing on the plate and throw it away? I'm sure that's what that means on some level, but if it helps our child nutrition program and we're making sure kids are being fed, I think that's a win-win across the board. So couple more pieces of funding left here. So we've got school funds online. So this is controlled by the schools. And this is for your fundraisers, field trips, donations that each individual school might get if they're under certain thresholds, athletics, clubs, all of that runs through. So I call it School Funds Online. That is actually what the software is called, is School Funds Online, so it makes it really simple. And there are still rules they have to follow with this money though. So they have to do receipting, they have to have dual signatures on their checks as well. They also have to send a monthly bank reconciliation to me where I go through and make sure nothing crazy is happening. I also internally audit all the schools every single year. When our external auditors come in, they also go to the schools and check them every single year because this is where most of our cash transactions happen. And if you know a little bit about accounting and fraud, you're most likely to have fraud when there's cash involved. Because it's super simple to take a 20 and put it in your pocket and nobody would know, compared to a check where you may have to forge some things and the bank might catch it. So we really try to have some good systems in place for them. I also bring them in quarterly for training to try to keep everybody up to speed. I've sent them to trainings as well with other school districts nearby to help keep us up to date with what we should and shouldn't be doing. So this is the pot of money where if a school comes to me and says, hey, I really want to buy a new sousaphone. Can you help me find funding for that? The first thing I say to them is, have you thought about doing a fundraiser? Because a fundraiser, they have control over. They can control what they're selling, what kind of fundraiser they're doing, how much they're bringing in. In School Funds Online, they get to make different account codes. So their band has an account code, football has an account code, cheerleading has an account code, so they can watch that money grow in real time. Hopefully you've seen with the state, federal, and local government, I have limited ways to get them additional funding. If new grants pop up, I will totally write a new grant to try to get us more funding, but as far as something like a sousaphone, we probably will not see a grant that I can apply for to get us a sousaphone. So this is something I always recommend to the schools. Have you thought about doing a fundraiser? Because it really could benefit you depending on what you do and what you need. So now we're going to move into account codes. Really quick before we get to the bond, I'm not going to bore you too much. If you guys were my bookkeeping staff, we could probably dive deeper into this, but just so you can see sort of what we're working with. So for our account code structure, this is mandated by the state, and it is, I believe, 17 digits. In the for-profit world, you maybe see 4, 6, 8 digits tops, so 17 is already a lot. The state is looking to have us go from 17 to 39 digits. They claim it's for more transparency and to give us more flexibility over our account codes. So it'll be a little bit of a learning curve to get from this to basically double. So I worked in a school district that actually made that transition to the huge account code string, and I was the one responsible for the software implementation and for training all of the staff. So I trained over 100 people on how to go from this to the big new one. So I'm confident when we get there, we'll be fine. It's gonna be a little bit of a learning curve. So for your account codes, this first digit, that's your fund. So if you notice at the top of my other slides, I was saying Fund 1, Fund 2, Fund 3, Fund 4, that's what this is here. So Fund 1 is state, Fund 2 is local, 3 is federal, 4 is capital, 5 is child nutrition, 6 and 7 we don't really use, 7's a reimbursable grants, 8 is your local restricted grants. Then we move into your purpose codes. So this is a very broad view of purpose codes. So DPI, I think it's a 37-page document where they detail each and every option you have for these 4 digits. Because to DPI, each and every digit means something different. So we're just gonna talk a little bit about the very first digit and what the very first digit means. So if you see a 5 in the beginning, that is for instructional services, and that is school specific, not student specific. So all of our teachers, their payroll codes start with a 5 because they are directly with kids every single day. Compared to our 6,000s, that is system-wide support. So my payroll code starts with a 6. I don't interact with students, but I'm here to support the school district as a whole. Then we have 7s. So 7s are your ancillary services, so child nutrition. Everything in child nutrition starts with a 7, going down the line. Then you have your 8s in the beginning. So 8s we don't use very often. That's if you're transferring. So I mentioned that local picks up a little portion of child nutrition. So we transfer money to them with the 8s category is how we do that. So then the next piece we have, I've mentioned this before, this is our PRC or our program report code. So these are your specific grants is what I want you to think of as these pockets of money. So this designates your activity. So I have a couple of examples up here that maybe will get thrown around, maybe not. 061 supplies, 050 is Title I, 15 is technology, 056 is transportation. So each department only has a few of these. So CTE I think has 4 or 5. CTE is our career technical education. EC, exceptional children, they maybe have 8 or 9. They've got a few more than everybody else does. So it just depends on what the department is as to how many. Same thing, our schools, they have maybe 3 of these to pick between, not a whole lot. Next block on here, 3 digits, is our object code. So the object code is what are you spending the money on? And so that is, yet again, this is very high level. The first digit, DPI, yet again, has a 20+ page document detailing each and every digit, what the combinations possibly mean. So anything in the 100s, always salaries. So 121 is the teacher code. Anything in the 200s is for benefits. And so we've got on here 211 is Social Security. Anything in the 300s is contracted services in some sort of fashion. So 311 is just straight up contract services. Anything in the 400s relates to supplies and materials. So 411 is supplies and materials. 461 is furniture and equipment. 500s is your capital outlay. So I went a little, 541 is a different furniture and equipment than 461. So 541s are big equipment that we need to capitalize compared to the 400s. 700s are the transfers. Then we've got our location code next. So these never change, thankfully, and these are the only options we have as far as locations codes go, for the most part. So the only other option you can see is a 3 zeros or an 810, and that is it. Nice and simple. Departments, so we've got a couple different departments, so that's what the next 3 digits are. This is telling us who actually owns that pot of money. And then the last 2 digits at the end, we use those just for projects. So most of our accounts have a 00 at the end, but if we have some kind of capital project, we do put a project number to try to help distinguish. Let's say Brevard Elementary School over the years has had 5 HVAC projects. If we've got the project code, we know the one that's in the 90s is the newest project compared to the one that says 10, that probably is from a longer time ago at least. So we'll do a quick bond update. So if you have any more questions, please feel free to let me know.
Can I ask you a question
Yeah,
on
go ahead.
codes?
Yeah.
Okay, so I went and printed those off the state website.
Yes.
And then I was trying to look at some of the documents that we've gotten from you about the budget and what you guys have. Are there any rules about mixing and matching, you know, like I found a roof repair that had a maintenance service code, but it also had a classroom teacher code, and it was labeled as a roof repair. So how would the classroom teacher code apply to that?
So when you say classroom teacher, do you mean it's in the 5,000s?
No, the 001,
So that's a PRC, so.
State
Yeah.
funds PRC, yeah.
Yes, so 001 is for most of our capital, and so in that case, that's the one weird case for Fund 4, where the PRC doesn't ever change very much, so we use 001 for the most part across the board. So that, to us, when we look at that, doesn't mean classroom teacher for Fund 4. For Fund 1 and Fund 2, it does, but for Fund 4, that's just where we put our, I know, to make it more confusing. And DPI also has a.
So in that case, it just means state funds.
So Fund 4 is local capital outlay. So yep, that's what that means to us, is that is our main pot of money, 001, for Fund 4, capital outlay.
Okay.
Yep. And so DPI, to make things more confusing too, they do give us a chart of accounts that we can use. So even if you see some kind of combination, you're like, oh, I have to be able to do contracted services out of this pot of money. Like, it just makes sense. And then you pull up DPI's chart of accounts, may or may not be in there. And if it's not in there, you can't do that combination of things you're trying to do the combination of. So you either need to rethink, okay, well, they don't want me to do this out of this grant. What other grant can I use this for? So it gets, yeah, the account codes, there's a lot of them. So I think this year we've used almost 4,000 unique account codes across the board.
So when you say the account code length is gonna double, what you're really saying is they're gonna require that much more detail about how you're spending each
Yes.
dollar.
That's exactly.
That's a nightmare. Wow.
So one of the things they're adding to the account codes, besides all of the bunch of extra digits in there, so they're adding a grant year. So when they add the grant year, what that means, especially for our federal funds, I mentioned we could have carryover. So if we carry over money, it's gonna be a different account code than when they give us the new money. So we could potentially, for 1 year, have double the amount of codes in all of our federal funds. So it's gonna, we'll figure out the grant. They haven't quite figured out the grant year thing yet, and that's supposed to start July 1. So when they figure it out, I'll figure it out after that. All right.
So Gabby, if you
Yeah.
wanted to look at, if you wanted to do a filter and find out, how many dollars in non-regular grant money is in the budget for that year? So I guess what I'm saying is, not the stuff, not the ESSERs and the stuff
Yeah.
that they, that are called grants at the state level.
Yeah.
You wanted, let's say, the
Typical
Dogwood
funding.
Foundation, or, somebody who wrote a grant for, some other STEM project or something. Is there any way to filter that out?
I could filter it, but I would need to be specific, if that makes sense. So I would already need to know what I'm looking for. So if you were to ask me what you just asked me, but if I was sitting in front of my computer with my spreadsheet up, I would need to know the names of those grants to pull them up. I wouldn't be able just to search, find me all donation-based grants that we have in the system. It won't let me. I would need to already know which ones those are. So if you were looking for Dogwood, I could totally pull Dogwood. If you were looking for some of the scholarships, I could pull the scholarships. But if you wanted me to find an all-inclusive list, that's where it gets a little, I could accidentally forget one and leave it off the list on accident. So I can definitely pull some of that, but it would take a little bit of thinking and asking some questions to make sure I'm catching everything for you. All right, so our bond, so the bond, as we all know, passed in 2018. The end of 2022, early 2023, it was decided that a capital needs study needed to be done in the summer to see what our real needs again were. So we had, I believe, done a capital needs study back in 2015, 2016. So I will say between 2015 and 2023, things were gonna change, but for the most part, the bad needs in 2015 we didn't fix are still gonna be bad needs that we have in 2023. So we did the capital needs study. We should have received that report in January. We did that joint meeting in March, so it was recorded. If you want to go back and listen to some of it or pull the minutes, it is on there. So the company that came out and did that did not do anything with safety. So we had to get a special safety study done, which is what took, that's why there's a delay between January and March while they were doing the safety study. To my knowledge, we have not seen a copy yet of the report from that safety study. I think they're working on it in the background. So I personally walked through 5 of the schools on the Capitol while we were doing that reserve study. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into when I said I would do this. So I showed up in my dress and my sandals, and they're like, all right, we're getting on the roof of Brevard High School. And I said, okay, getting on the roof. So walked around the roofs, walked in and out of everything. $68 million is not enough across the board. And Axios even presented that. So I've got that on this slide. This was before Axios presented their numbers to let people know that $68 million was not going to fix all 9 schools to get them up to where they should be. And Axios even confirmed that it is not, $68 million is not enough to do all the work that we need across our schools. So the bond expires in 7 years from when, I don't know the exact date of time, but 7 years. I don't know if it's from the date the bond referendum passed, but somewhere in there, 7 years from that date, the bonds expire. So we are kind of running towards the end of that time. We've been working together with trying to get the bonds to be sold. The timeline right now is to sell them in October and then receive the money in November. So if that gets done, we will definitely be ahead of the 7 years, and we won't even need to worry about an extension. But if for some reason there's delays in there, the county commissioners do have an opportunity to extend the bond for an additional 3 years, but that would need to be passed. It's not automatic. So we've got a lot of things to do with this bond, I think, to get it where it needs to be.
Would it have to be voted on by the public?
The extension, I don't think so. I don't know the procedures to do an extension, but I believe just the county commissioners voting for the extension would be enough, to my knowledge anyway. Go ahead.
It's kind of a double question. What are the obstacles, or the things you have to do to be able to issue those bonds by November? And is it planned that it would be in one tranche? It would be the whole 68 million, or you would do it in pieces?
Yep, so I only know a piece of it, so I know the county has to do more things on the back end than what I have to do on my end. So the date we're working towards right now is July 1 to figure out what projects we're doing and what that scope of work looks like for those projects. And after that, I know they have to have meetings with the states. Don't know what group they're meeting with, how many meetings, I'm not sure about all that. But then they'll go ahead and sell in October. And as far as how many tranches, I would say I would have to go back to the meeting and listen one more time, because they did mention one tranche, maybe a second tranche. So we haven't quite narrowed down yet how many projects and how much money we're gonna be pulling on the first tranche. I personally would love to see pull down everything and get as much started as humanly possible here in the beginning. So we'll see if that's what we agree on. And I'm hoping we can do some of these meetings public. So right now we have a work scope committee, and there's no board members involved, so it's not publicly recorded while we're trying to figure this stuff out on the back end. So I'm hoping once we get it figured out on the back end, then we can talk about it more at the publicly recorded meetings. So at this point, I have no idea. One tranche or two. So tranche is what they just call, to my knowledge, is what they call pulling down the money. They can do it in different tranches.
So it's like a group.
Yep, they can pull down different pieces. Go ahead.
Do you actually have to have bids for the work, or just the scope of
No,
work?
just the
has to be
scope of
defined?
work.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, the bond passed, the referendum passed, then didn't the county raise taxes and are collecting money? So what happens with that money when the 68 million comes down?
They make payroll with it.
So they have raised taxes, and I believe it's actually written that way on, I've heard it's written that way on people's tax bills, that it was for the school bond when it was raised. I do not have clarification with where it's sitting, how much interest it's earning. So legally, they don't have to give us any of that money because they never sold a bond. So until they sell a bond, the school district is owed nothing, and there's nothing we can do. So I don't know where the money's sitting, what they can do with it. So to my knowledge, raising the taxes was to pay off the bond payments, but without bond payments, I'm not sure.
Well, do we know if that $68 million is there?
So they haven't pulled a full 68 million yet. I believe they've pulled somewhere between 20 and 30 million. And yet again, I'm not sure where it is or what's happening with it. That would definitely be a question for the county.
What's in the education capital fund then?
So the Education Capital Fund, I have not seen a breakdown of what is in there. I've asked for it. I haven't seen it yet. Maybe I'll get it at some point. The Education Capital Fund is supposed to be some of this property tax money for the bonds. It's also supposed to be our sales tax money, all put into one. But I haven't seen how much is actually in there, so I don't know.
Do you know why, or is there reasons for delaying selling the bonds, or it's good to October, November? Is that?
We've asked some of those questions as well, and we were told that that's the soonest they could do it.
Well, doesn't the local government commission has to approve it before
They
they
do.
can sell the bonds? So there's a
But
timing issue there,
They
right?
do meet monthly, that much I do know.
So as far as you know, what is left? When you say there is still, the scope of the work, it still needs to be determined.
Yes.
I don't wanna put you in a difficult position,
Yeah.
but would you be willing to characterize what the issues are that remain to be solved?
Yeah, so we've only had one meeting so far. So the one meeting that we did have, we went down the list that Axios provided at the publicly recorded meeting and worked through which ones are a priority, which ones do we need to do before some of the other ones. But we didn't actually talk about a bottom dollar with how much that's gonna cost yet. We didn't actually talk about which ones are we doing in fiscal year 25, 26, 27, so we haven't gotten to that point yet. So that's some of the stuff we still need to work out on the back end, is which projects are gonna happen when, which ones are being bundled together versus which ones are standalone projects. So we really just kind of went down the list together.
And then do both boards need to approve whatever this work group comes up with?
I believe so. So I believe they've already approved what Axios presented. So I
Right.
don't know if that's officially enough or if they'll need to approve something else too. I don't know 100% what'll need to happen with that.
Did Axios prioritize projects, or is this all falling on the local government?
So they sort of prioritize on there, so that's actually all on the county's website, everything from Axios. So they did label some things as maintenance, some things as critical needs. They labeled things with a 2, 3, and 4, with a high, medium, low. But to me, for me, not having a construction background, it was specific, but not specific, if that makes sense. Just like a layman person, like I'm looking at this list, and I'm like, but which one's more important? Should I be looking at the 1, 2, 3? Should I be looking at the high, medium, low? Should I be looking at the critical needs or the maintenance things? So I couldn't tell you right now which one is like the top of the list. I am not 100% sure at this moment anyway.
Is anyone from the Axios group consulting with you all while you do this?
They are. So
Okay.
at the joint meeting, we had to kind of go through the projects line by line. They were there with us. So we had some questions about, you said we're fixing plaster, where's the plaster? Which piece of plaster, where in the building are we fixing? So they were there to kind of help us walk through. So then they had pictures. They were able to show us pictures of, hey, here's where the damage is. And so that was helpful. Go ahead.
You've got to scan 5 or 6 or 7 weeks before the last commission meeting in June for them to make a decision as to whether to proceed with this by June 1st. Do you have a timeline for when your committee might report out?
So I've asked when our next meeting will be, and I've just been told it will be scheduled. So I'm not sure.
Who's running this committee? Is it the county or the school?
The county.
County. The same one that's put you off for 5 years, 6 years. What happens to the bond money if they do not extend it?
If they choose not to extend the bond or sell the bonds, they get to keep everything.
Then it's just property tax money that belongs,
Yes.
that they can use for anything.
Exactly, like the courthouse.
Courthouse.
So they can sell the school bond to build the courthouse.
No.
So they can't sell the school bonds to build the courthouse.
They can
But they can,
25 mil.
but they can use the property taxes, any property taxes, or anything along similar things to build the courthouse if they wanted to. But if they sell the school bonds, it is for the schools, and we will get the 68 million.
Well, you said if they don't extend it, they get to keep it. What do they get to keep?
So they would get to keep all the property tax dollars that they've raised so far, and then they will continue to raise on the increase in property taxes.
You mean the property tax fund balance that they borrow money out of to make payroll?
Go ahead.
Aren't those funds and those monies publicly reported? Now, we could ask for it
You
nicer.
can. You can ask for it.
Is there not a legal, do we have legal standing to request that detail?
You
How
can.
much is it, where it's being held?
Yes,
So
you can ask
we
that.
could-
Everything is public record. So same thing with the school district. Everything we do is public record. So if you wanna know some of our salaries at the school district, you wanna see emails about certain things, whatever it might be, we have to provide it to you. So it's the same thing for the county. If you wanna see emails, salary, bond information, they have to provide that as well. So the guidance we have from the state, like the statute says, a reasonable amount of time. So there is no, exactly, so there is no, we have to provide it to you within 90 days, 50 days, whatever it might be. So I will say, we do sometimes the same thing. If someone sends a huge public records request and we can't get to it, we table it off to the side and get to it maybe 45, 60 days later. So, not that I'm saying anybody would try to do that on purpose, but if there's a lot of other things happening, you may
Might have
see your
to
public
delay
records
system.
request kind of shift to the side for a little bit. Go ahead.
I can tell you, just because I looked at the audits lately, you can look, they haven't finished their audit for 23. So the last one online on the school board site, look for the comprehensive financial report, those are based on audited numbers. And you can look for, do a search for the education capital projects fund. So do a search for that, and I think at the end of 22, there was 14.2 million. And then I asked Jamie for a story I did about a month ago, and there was, she said there would be 21 million in there at the end. I don't know if it was 23 or 20. So I think at the end of fiscal year 23, which is almost a year ago, there was 21 million.
Now, 8 cents a year would equate to roughly $6 million a year.
6.2, yeah.
It was 6.2, and then it got reduced
Yeah.
this current fiscal year is 6 million.
That's right, the balance budget.
Yeah.
So definitely if you want to ask some questions, I would absolutely ask some questions, and they should be able to get you some answers. And so I also want to say, it seems very heavy, you know, like the bond, nobody's thrilled. Look what's happening with the bond, no matter what side you're on, or what. So for me, it's not about Board of Education versus county commissioners or Democrat versus Republican. To me, it's about what's best for our kids and what can we do with what we have right now. So sure, we would have loved to have built the brand new schools in 2018 or 2019, but that's not where we are now. We're here in 2024, and we've got to try to come up with what is the next best thing that we can give to our kids. So that's what I'm here for anyway, is what we can do to try to help. Go ahead.
The 68 mil, I was on the school board. The 68 million was not intended to take care of all nine schools. It was intended to take care of the two
Biggest
high
thing.
schools. And that's all, because when you do a general bond referendum, you either get what you ask for or you get zero, and you can't try again for 2 years.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So we asked for what we thought would pass, and it will.
Well, I just wanted to ask, about the foot dragging, about the furnace, the down payment that's necessary for the furnaces, which I remember from the Axios evening was a crucial, immediate need. What, what recourse do people have when there's no explanation for delaying with a down payment for something we know?
So we might be getting that fixed.
Good.
So, we'll be talking about that at our publicly recorded meeting on Monday a little bit. And then I believe we'll be on the county commissioner's agenda for May 28th, so we'll see what happens.
And Gabi too, the need for all the 9 schools are not the same.
No.
So the main need right now is the 2 high schools and Rosman Middle School. So why are we not, you know, like emphasizing that in, you know, with the Axis and, you know, and I think they pretty well did emphasize that a lot in the Axis meeting about they were the main things. So, I mean, why are we not, you know, kind of getting away from that, you think?
So I think some of what has happened is, so like the boilers we need boilers at Brevard Middle School, Rosman Middle, Rosman High, and Pisgah Forest. So sure, Rosman Middle, Rosman High was on the original list, but then, so I guess what I'm trying to say is those needs are still bad, but we've had a few others start to creep up there to them. And so that's where I think people have started to advocate for all 9 schools instead of just for the 3. So for me, my biggest concerns at Brevard High are the beams at the old gym and the beams at the cafeteria. So at the county's meeting on Monday, they said they've had somebody come out and test the beams to see what is the life like on these beams. So if we do nothing to the beams and leave them the way they are, they could last up to 5 years. Maybe more, but up to 5 years.
But maybe
There's
less.
no way.
If we do a maintenance plan,
There's no way.
if we do maintenance to the beams, the company says that they could last up to 15 years, maybe more. So for me, that's what we keep advocating the most for is we don't need just a maintenance plan. We don't want a building that only has a 15-year shelf life. We want buildings that are gonna last 50, 75, 100 years down the road. But the issue is if we were to tear down those buildings or do something significant to fix the beams on those buildings, that would eat a large portion of the 68 million. And then that means the other schools would have to do with less. So I don't know at this point which way it's gonna lean and what exactly we're gonna do. So we are hoping with that needs-based capital grant in August, that's what we're going to apply for, is to redo those buildings for the cafeteria and the old gym because of the beam structure. So we're hoping that even though we're not a tier 1 school district, that if we send pictures of what these beams actually are, that the state might kind of jump in and say, okay, let's help them. So, but then what do we do if we don't get that state funding and we've already allocated bond funds to something else? I don't have an answer for that at the moment.
So emergency funding, you mentioned that's hard, challenging, because it's not there.
Yes.
So what if the building is condemned? Something does happen unexpectedly. How does that get funded?
Yep, so if a building were to be condemned, which I think we may have seen that in the past, I wasn't living here when I've heard about it, but I didn't see it for myself. I heard the cafeteria got condemned at one point. So the solution at the time was to put the brackets on the beams, and while that was being done, the kids had to eat outside under tents. So I think if a building were condemned again today, we would see something similar. The kids would either have to be moved, so if the old gym, for example, got condemned, the kids would have to move to another classroom somewhere that do class in that gym. We would just shut it down and wait and come up with a plan.
Right, so the funding isn't available there, it would be then, okay, scramble, figure out how
Yes.
to move kids and then start finding money.
Exactly.
But aren't the commissioners legally obligated to provide for the capital needs of the schools? Isn't that statutory?
I believe so. So I haven't read the statute myself, but they are our only source of capital funding.
Right.
Like, besides the couple of small pots of lottery funds that I highlighted where we get $750,000 a year, that's not enough to fix a potentially condemned building. So yeah, if we need some major work done, it has to come from the county. We don't have any other option except the needs-based grant, which we're applying for. But that doesn't help with emergencies either. That has to be a long-term planning. Go ahead.
Well, and I guess that's maybe you're answering my question kind of. That needs-based grant is something that you don't, a lot of the funds that you're describing have to be used within a fiscal year, right?
Yes.
And so what I'm really kind of astonished by in this county is how little planning we have for the obsolescence of our buildings, right? Here we are, we have so many buildings that need to be rebuilt, and obviously there's no money to do it. And so what are the options if the county wanted to get back on a track of saving for the obsolescence of the school buildings? where would that money go and where would it come from so that it wouldn't have to be spent within that fiscal year? It could accrue.
Yeah, so the county funding for us is different. So that money can sit there and accrue on their books, or it can sit and accrue on our books if it's the local side. So our money, state and federal, are the ones that disappear after a year. The only thing that doesn't is the occasional thing like textbook money or the needs-based capital grant. They would not expect us to spend $50 million in construction in 1 year. They would let us have that over however many years the project took. So as far as capital needs for the county, there is a way where they can save and come up with a 10-year plan of maintenance across the board, not just for the schools, but for the courthouse and for Blue Ridge Community College and all of these other really big needs that we have. So it's just a matter though of, I think, rethinking, because we have not thought like that in the past. So it would take some serious rework with how do we do this as a community, come together and get something like this done.
Well,
Go ahead.
and have a plan.
Yes.
Of, in 10 years, you know.
Here's what we're
These
replacing.
buildings are not 100-year buildings, and they're not even 70-year buildings, and we're just putting lipstick on a pig. And hoping that it holds together instead of saying the hard thing that, okay, we've gotta start saving up for $150 million.
Well, the problem is now we have to do both, because we have to
Well,
make them
right,
safe,
exactly,
and now
because-
we also have to save,
Yeah,
so that,
and
yeah.
it's a community problem, it's not
It
just
is.
a commission problem,
Yeah.
it's not just a school board problem, we've
It's-
refused to plan.
Yes, it's how can we plan together as a community and figure out the best way going forward.
And not make the assumption that the existing school buildings are the school buildings we're gonna have 15 years from now. You know, we have to have some criteria that says, once the population gets to this, we need to think about
What else is?
whether that school, it makes sense to keep that particular school, whatever school it is up there.
I know that's also another hot topic
Oh, yeah,
is
it is.
consolidation. So I'm not, for me, for or against anything, but I look at numbers, ADM numbers, numbers to run the buildings, numbers to keep buildings open. So for me, it's always about what's best for our kids. And I see both sides. I see where keeping all 9 schools is amazing, and we love that for our kids to have opportunity and choices. But I also see the numbers to do all those things, and we may not have it in the future. So I definitely see both sides of, but that's also, I think, discussions we should be having as a community as to what is the tipping point? Like, at what point do we say this has to be done whether we want it or not? I don't know what that point is, and I don't know how we have those conversations without people getting really upset because they do. Go ahead.
This is also a community issue when we don't have, when we haven't taken care of our schools, because if we're expecting to draw industry, large or small, they look at a school system. They want to know what's
The grades of